Hello and welcome once again, everyone. After a very successful 16-part series of the International Advertising Association's India chapter, Mentorship Webinar, The World Goes Digital, we welcome all of you to the third Mentorship Webinar on transformation in the digital era. Be it business transformation or life transformation, it requires a great deal of courage, determination, and a burning hunger for innovation. Today, we have with us someone who will be talking to you about not just transformation, but this is someone who has actually brought many business transformation along with transformation for the good of many. That is transformation in the societies. And in today's world, that's what really counts, right? Ralph Simon heads London-based Mobilium Global, and he's been around for 17 years as a founder to help to grow the mobile entertainment, health, and content industry, while playing a very, very critical and central role in its impact and presence. Working with global thought leaders to shape mobile strategies, he has also impacted the social and economic fabric of many societies. Ralph travels the world on a relentless search for the latest in innovation. It's the endless resume. And if I just keep talking about him, it's going to take me an entire hour and nobody will have anything more to say. So we caught him in India in one of these travels to share his knowledge with us. Ralph, welcome. Hola, señor.
Bahut acha.
Bahut acha. Muy bien, muy bien.
Muy
¿Y
bien.
tú? I believe
Ticket.
No, well, that might have sounded like I was speaking in some gibberish and he was speaking in Hindi. His Hindi is far more fluent than my Spanish.
Yeah.
So welcome once again.
Thank
Good
you
to
very
have you here with us.
Thank you.
I believe
Great
he
to be here.
speaks like about 4 or 5 languages, including Hindi. Tell us, what languages do you speak, Ralph?
No, I don't speak all that many, unfortunately. I speak a little bit of Spanish, speak Flemish and Dutch, and speak English, so bad English sometimes. And I'm learning Hindi with the many times that I've come to India. I'm a great student of it, and particularly of Indian culture and Indian modern advertising and internet culture, which is really a key area.
But Ralph, you do know that in India, if you speak in Hindi, they won't understand you. You need to speak in English.
English.
English is the language,
That's
right? So just
like that movie English Finglish.
You know a lot more about Bollywood than I would, probably. Right. Just a quick one to remind all of you, a lot of you have actually written to us and you've liked the live show that we do. So to let you know, there are a lot of students, a lot of corporates who are actually beaming this live on their screens. So thousands watching us from different parts of the country and from different colleges. So they need advice from you. Right. So today is going to be a mix of your experience across the world and some takeaways for a lot of these students and corporates who want to learn from that. Right. So tell us something about it, Ralph. Like, you've really traveled lots of countries, many parts of the world. Which has been your favorite? Favorite from the point of view that where did you feel that your expertise has really impacted for the good, the larger good of society the most? Which has been your favorite spot?
Well, you know, one of the key things is I believe that what one has to do today is you can do well by doing good. And doing well by doing good and the work that you do to have a positive societal impact and benefit is really key. I was originally born in Africa, so I came from the background of having had an African upbringing, which was rather wild and unrestrained. But over the last many years, spending time in California, living in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, living in Los Angeles, being close to Hollywood, spending a lot of time in India, being close to Bollywood, and of course, being based in London, which is a good springboard to work in a lot of different areas. And having been involved now in mobile from the very early days of when mobile began, at first, one always looked at Japan and Korea, particularly, for example, in Japan, when Docomo started and really changed the basis by which content and entertainment was used. That and the gamification of mobile technology and mobile apps and mobile usage has all played a role. But now you're seeing the internationalization of many of these things all coming together, whereby one has to be aware of what goes on internationally, because somebody living in Kolkata that comes up with an interesting invention or app or something like that could have impact all over the world. And then there are many examples of people in India making something, whether it's in Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai, that has an impact all over the world. And that really is the frame of reference that we look at, trying to see where there's something really, really cool.
Right. I hear what you're saying, but tell me, I always had the suspicion that the larger good that we talk about, while the cause is really very, very noble, right? How many marketers or how many people, not just marketers, why should the onus be on only marketers? How many people are really using the mobile or any technology for really the larger good without the selfish aim of a business angle to it?
You know, I think that certainly over the last 8 to 10 years, you've seen that area growing considerably. And I'll give you just one example. There's a company that was started by a couple of Americans called Charity Water. And Charity Water has been basically, it's kind of like a Kickstarter for water, developing something that brings water to communities that don't have it. Let's say a community in Ethiopia that doesn't have water. It gets a lot of following all over the world, people wanting to contribute to doing well by doing good. There's actually a couple of interesting companies in California. The Sexton Company, Sexton, like in sex. Tim Sexton is the guy who runs it, is one of the great leaders in the world in doing well by doing good and doing good by doing it. But it's a combination. It's a combination. So altruism mixed with smart technology thinking. And of course, today, because you have almost 7.5 billion mobile devices worldwide, this is becoming the device that really governs a lot of people's interaction in this space and in business and in being able to make an impact in communities that you are developing things for. So yes, it is still, you need business, you need the commercial rationale to make something work, but fundamentally there is this greater, particularly with millennials, this greater understanding of doing the right thing and doing things that are beneficial rather than things that are just negative or purely for money.
Yeah. Interestingly, a lot of young people, and a lot of young people are watching you today and listening to you today, they're always caught up between the urge to want to play a role in changing society, but also the urge to make money, right? When they embark on their careers and their next vision and dream that they want to really fulfill, what should they be looking for? I mean, should be a combination of both? Should they be pursuing the larger good? And would your advice be to say that money comes in, the business will work if the larger society is benefited? How does it work for them?
Okay, I'll give you an interesting example that I think has now made a global impact. I don't know how many of the viewers that are watching this webinar today are familiar with someone by the name of Travis Kalanick.
Travis Kalanick.
So Travis Kalanick, just some 8 years ago, was sleeping on the floor of someone's apartment in Los Angeles. And he did something which a lot of people around the world are doing. They look at their world and they say, I've noticed that there's a particular thing I'm having difficulty with. I can't get it done. I can't somehow find it in my town. Let me see how I can improve something. And he's the guy who founded Uber. And his whole theme was he'd had difficulty getting a taxi cab in Los Angeles. And he came up with the idea of blending technology and an application that could basically get cars quickly, that evolved into Uber. And Uber went from literally nothing with a lightning-like growth now in over 400 cities around the world. And it's a company that's got a value of over $25 billion.
Yes, that's
right. Now, how did he start that? He started it on the basis that there was a need to be able to get taxis in an easy way. And you think to yourself, well, particularly in a city like Mumbai, where we're doing this webcast from, where there are so many dozens and dozens of taxis, and obviously there's also been difficulties with the legal procedures in certain cities, in Germany, for example, and in Spain, France, been a lot of difficulty. But on a global basis, this need at a local level was something that was met by what Uber did. So in answer to your question, if you are sitting somewhere in India and you have got an idea of something that you think, why can that not be improved? I know, for example, a couple of young guys and women in Berlin were worried about all the pollution in Berlin. And they came up with a stack about as high as you and I are. So it's probably about 5.5 feet, 6 feet.
Close.
But they had built this so that they would go to the city of Berlin and place it in different parts of the city with a special kind of plant, a leaf that would actually bring in and seep in polluted air,
right,
and breathe out through the leaves cleaner air with a kind of a wind fan that was built into it, solar powered. And this box, as it were, is now being placed in German cities, helping to cleanse the air of the cities. Why did they do this? Because they felt they wanted to make a difference to having a cleaner environment in German cities.
But let me ask you another question. I understand what you're saying, and that's how perhaps Airbnb also started. Airbnb started from a huge need that two people had, where they couldn't find a cheap, low-cost accommodation for themselves. So they started this on their own. They wanted money. They set out a mattress and said they were hiring it out, right, to guests.
And there's a fantastic story behind that, because there were these three guys that were at RISD, which is the Rhode Island School of Design in America. And they had always wanted to design something that was really cool and interesting on the web. There was a big design conference in San Francisco, and they recognized that a lot of designers were coming in and couldn't get accommodation. And you're exactly correct. They decided to use the air mattress in one of their rooms. And they then said, if we can now perfect design. So this is a very important thing to be aware of. When you're developing an idea, what you've got to think about is, how can you enhance the design? Because design is everything. Designing the look, the feel, the coding, the technology, the cybernetics. What I always think is interesting is if you look today at the way that phones are being used to make payments, money through phones, where did this come about? Which country did mobile payments start? People think, oh, it must have been America. No, it wasn't America. It was a country that no one would ever even have anticipated. It was in Kenya, in East Africa. I was about to say, yes, and how did that come about? Well, there was a very interesting, far-sighted individual who ran the equivalent of the largest telco in Kenya. He went to 3 banks in Kenya and said, why is it that if I bring dollars to the bank, I can convert them into shillings? Why can't I take minutes and convert minutes into a payment? The banks and the telco worked together, and they came up with something called M-Pesa, M-P-E-S-A, M for mobile, Pesa, which is money in Swahili. And they worked out a way in which if you buy minutes, pay as you go for your phone, the banks would honor those minutes and pay the money. And that then led to what is now more than 70% of the population of Kenya does all of their transacting, buying school books, paying for school fees, buying medicine, buying groceries with M-Pesa. And now, of course, in India, this is a very big way of
that's
making
right.
payments.
And also India is launching, in a big way, it's launching the payment banks as well. Private companies are launching payment banks.
Right.
And that's also going to help boost the mobile usage as well as the economy and the ecosystem around it. Right?
Exactly.
That's going to be useful for them. But tell me, one more thing that comes to mind is scale. Right. One is design that you talked about. Right. But in countries like Africa and India, in the past, India used to be compared a lot to Brazil because of the numbers and the size of the country. Right. But I think in terms of the infrastructure and the kind of spread of mobile, it's closer perhaps to Africa. The numbers seem very, very similar. 800 million connections in Africa. Is that
correct?
Right?
That's about right.
Right. And we're close to about 900 in India. So the numbers are right. The infrastructure is underdeveloped in both countries at different points, at different scales, but underdeveloped in both countries.
Well, there are 54 countries in Africa, so that's one of the essential differences between India and Africa.
I agree. It's a continent, and therefore different countries there.
Exactly right.
But even so, in terms of, I guess, the larger ecosystem development, they're very similar, I would say. You've worked a lot in the African countries. Tell us something about how you've really faced these challenges, trying to bring the mobile ecosystem into that market.
Well, one of the biggest problems in Africa early on in the evolution and development of mobile was that the fixed line telephone network was only available to very few, similar to India. Of course, with the many different countries, 54, there are probably 10 countries that were the leaders that were ahead of most other countries, and they would have been South Africa, which generally tended to be ahead, Kenya, Tanzania. You would have in the French-speaking territories like Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Chad, and Senegal, that would have the benefit of some French technology that would be brought in. But just to give you an idea of scale, the largest telco operator in Africa is called MTN, and they have, in the 17 countries that they operate in Africa, about 200 million subscribers. So in India, if you have 14 telco operators, and I think the leader is Airtel, if I'm not mistaken, in India.
I'm not allowed to take sides.
Okay, well, of the 14. But at any rate, the point is that certainly where there is absolutely a similarity is that the mobile device became the chosen device for communicating. It was low cost. It was effective. I mean, just in terms of cost, nothing can beat the low cost of telephone service in India.
That's right. That's true. But again, looking at, let's say, once again, comparing Africa to India, as well as some of the other countries that I have lived and worked in, the pace of change, how do you see that in the Western markets that you've worked in, some of the European markets, and the pace of change in India and Africa? Is it slower, or is it going at the right pace? I know that there are numbers, for example, in India, we're expecting, and I'm just saying expecting because it's anyone's guess how in the next 3 months or the next 6 months or the next 2 years is going to pan out to be, but 53% of spends on advertising through the internet is going to be through mobile, is what the expectation in India is. How does that pan out in terms of what the spends are in Africa and the European markets?
Well, traditional advertising still has a place in Africa.
Right.
You are definitely seeing a reduction in classified advertising in print media. You're definitely seeing a conversion into advertising on mobile. That is absolutely growing. Online is a little bit slow in Africa, certainly slower than India. If India has got 200 plus million people online on the internet, maybe it's more now, approaching 300 million. That would certainly be greater than Africa. Africa has a very low internet penetration at this particular point because both the mobile device and mobile online and the mobile internet is something that all the telcos have really accelerated, because that ultimately is the best way of being able to have a device that works. There are many places in Africa that don't have electricity, or they have very, very irregular supply of electricity.
Similar in many interiors of India, where one has to go and get the mobiles charged in a different town and come back.
So I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I have a friend who's a professor of engineering in Africa, and he was working in a particular village, and there was always a difficulty having enough electricity to be able to charge everyone's mobile phones. And what he did was, he says, we've got to stop this not getting electricity on phones. People have got to be connected. He was working with a hospital where the doctors needed to have their phones charged on a regular basis. And what he did was he invented a stationary bicycle.
Right.
And he would get someone in the hospital to ride the bike. The bike would stir up a generator, and you could plug your phone into one of the wheels of the bike. And it was important that someone was always riding the bike in the hospital, because if someone was riding the bike, you could get your phone charged. Now that's changed, but that was just a story.
So there was at least one very fit person in that hospital,
and someone
riding his bike all the time.
And someone who thought out of the box to do well by doing good.
That brings me to an example that we had discussed some time ago, which was somewhere in Sri Lanka, where the public bus system, the public buses that people take, one of the healthcare companies actually came up with a ticket, the bus ticket, which also acted as a soap, right?
Correct.
So instead of throwing it away, you could use it as a soap. So they were promoting hygiene.
Correct.
Right? Now, you've worked in these markets as well. Are some of these really do-good ideas? Do they remain as one-off ideas because the word gets spread about the organization or the healthcare unit or whatever that might be? Or is it really sustained in terms of definitely doing good for that market? Do people carry these ideas through? Have you seen any, and can you narrate some examples of where one such idea has impacted the society and continues to do so and hasn't been dropped after the idea has had its own, has had its own life in the WhatsApp groups?
Well, I'll give you an example. What you quoted in Sri Lanka was interesting because there was a campaign by the Ministry of Health to try and get people to wash their hands. It's similar to the way that Unilever, which is a big company with many different projects and products, and particularly in India, trying to stress the importance of hand washing,
Yep.
because that really prevents secondary infection and health of babies and
Yes.
growing children and so forth. And in Sri Lanka, in a combined effort with the Ministry of Health, a company came up with the idea of having bus tickets, because a lot of bus transportation, similar to India,
Yes.
that was infused with soap.
Right.
So when you got your ticket to go on the bus, you could wipe your hands with the ticket, and that in essence would be like having a hand cleansing, like you see now when you
Great idea.
washing it.
Great
Very good
idea, I would have thought, yes.
And tied into the campaign by the Ministry of Health and the company that made the product, it was a combined way of getting the best of advertising and government policy for health and wellness of the community. Another one that's on a more commercial basis in Holland, there's now something that is called the proactive, if you want to call it that, billboard or screen. Just imagine you standing at a bus stop and there is a screen that would ordinarily feature advertising. You stand in front of the screen and the screen is able to tell whether you have flu or whether you have a cold. This is similar to when, if you go through the airport, notably during the SARS epidemic in Hong Kong, you'd go through the airport and they would measure your temperature as you were going through. And if your body showed up red rather than green, then that would be a warning sign to the health authorities to determine something. So this is a commercial extension of taking that similar kind of basically very basic screening technology that health systems use just to get a sense of who might have a fever and who might not.
But Ralph, something like that in India will start malfunctioning, because anyone who passes by will be sneezing and coughing, and we all have colds all through the year.
Right.
So this thing won't work in our country anymore.
I know. Well, you've got to then think of what is the engineering design? How do you make it robust so that it can stop pilfering? Important. Stop someone stealing it, because someone might think, oh, that's a good screen, let me use that to go and watch TV at home. So these are all things that really tie in with what works from a design point of view that makes it robust and can really withstand a lot of punishment.
At least 20,000 sneezes a day.
20,000 sneezes a day.
So it's interesting that you say that the governments actually have been involved in some of these initiatives, right?
Health, yes.
Health initiatives particularly. To make a big impact and difference. Is that important? I would say yes, I guess, without the government's support. And therefore, my question really is, to countries where the government plays a far more aggressive and authoritative role, tend to develop these technologies and solutions a lot faster than countries which are democracies?
I would say not. And if I have a look at some of the most important areas of incubation, and there's now what they say are 5 golden rules for developing an incubation city in the world. So if we look at incubation cities, let's think of, if you think of what the best or the most successful incubation areas in the world might be, the number 1 area in the world for incubating ideas and technologies would be Silicon Valley.
Right. Yes.
And on a global basis, where the most new patents are registered comes from Silicon Valley. There is much, much less government interference in Silicon Valley because entrepreneurial activity and entrepreneurial impetus is really what drives things. If you look at 28-year-old Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, what drove Mark Zuckerberg at the beginning when he dropped out of Harvard and came up with the idea of Facebook, desperately looking for money? So interesting now when you see Facebook being this absolute mega company with Mark Zuckerberg himself having a value of some $40 billion at age 28.
Yes.
It's maybe a little bit more than the Ambanis have got here in India. But if you look at something like that, it would never have worked if there'd been some kind of government interference or government holding back the process. You need that. But looking at incubation cities, let's have a look at areas where startups work really well. And in fact, just this week here in India, in a number of the newspapers, there was some interesting articles about Startika, starting up companies.
Okay.
But Israel is a very good example of what they refer to themselves as a startup nation. I wonder if many who are watching this webinar are familiar with a great app which is now owned by Google called Waze.
Yes.
Do you know Waze?
Yes, I do.
So Waze started out basically an idea in Tel Aviv in Israel by a small group of guys and women who felt that they could do something really interesting because traffic was such a problem in getting into work in Tel Aviv in the morning. And this has now evolved into a massively successful company. It got sold to Google, I think, for around $1.5 billion.
Yes.
No,
I hear that Google was actually trying to replicate some of its features.
That's correct.
And they found it much easier to just buy it out.
Absolutely. Whereas they tend to do that. They've got the money to do it, and they can do it.
Right.
Okay, so you've got Silicon Valley, you've got Israel, you've got Berlin, very important in Europe as an incubation city. You certainly in India, it goes without saying, you've got Bangalore, you've got Pune, you have Hyderabad, you've got some great stuff in fintech going on in Chennai. Yes. You've got some interesting new developments in Kolkata now that is really interesting. And of course in Mumbai, there's an amazing degree of really interesting new stuff coming up. I saw something yesterday that was shown to me by one of the great visionaries, as I call them, of India, a fellow by the name of Devraj Sanyal, who runs Universal Music Group, the big music company. And he has come up with he showed me this incredible app yesterday that allows you to basically decide exactly what you want to get from the internet so that you don't have to trawl through so much to find the little things that you like. And it's called the Hip Hopper app.
Okay.
Anyway, this was something that was basically born right here in Mumbai, where we're doing this webcast from. But getting back to the incubation cities, believe it or not, that Amazon do a lot of their cloud development in Cape Town in South Africa, because for some reason there are a lot of developers living in a nice place. And so when you look at all of these different places around the world, the capital city of Chile is now doing something. There, the government is playing an interesting role, because if you've got a startup, the government will pay your salaries of your startup team as a means of encouraging what you're doing. And
what's their mode of selection of the right startup? So do they have a blanket offer?
They have a blanket offering if you can, if you're showing that you've got a startup, which is something I would love to see in India. It's hard to do.
Oh no, we can't, because our government will go completely bankrupt. Right. We've got these startups happening at every home in India.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So
it's difficult to do that. But then of course in the UK, the government there played a very interesting role to at least trigger a whole development called Tech City. And Tech City takes place in an area of London called Shoreditch. And this is now, it is so hot and so hip. I was trying to find out what the Hindi word is for hip. It is so hip. What would hip be in Hindi?
Hip would be...
Or in Bengali, what would it be? What might it be?
In Bengali? Bengali would be more traditional, would be hip there. So I guess, we adopt English words. That's why I said you need to know English.
Right.
Now, hip you claim it to be an English word. It's no longer an English word in India.
That's right.
So hip is now a Hindi word and a Bengali word.
Oh, right.
You've just borrowed the word from us.
Okay, so.
That's how it works with us.
Okay, TK hip.
TK hip, absolutely,
okay.
TK hip.
So, interestingly enough, what Tech City has done, it's developed a range of really interesting startups, and the British government did get involved because the financial area and the financial industry in London, financial technology, is absolutely key, because London is one of the great financial centers of the world, with New York, Frankfurt slightly behind. Right. But the government did play a role to encourage young companies getting developed. So there are now 5 basic rules for a company, for a city, to be an incubation city. And I wonder, with those that are watching, does your city fall into these categories? Okay, number 1, you need to have a good university that produces mathematics graduates who have an aptitude for coding. So most major Indian cities have got a good university, or certainly one that has an emphasis with the IITs on mathematics.
Yes.
Number 2, you have to have large spaces, like warehouse spaces. And most Indian cities have got large spaces. Many of them are unused. Many of them are just rotting away, and cities and city governments should be doing more to make them available, because you need large spaces to have large teams of people working. The third thing is that those large spaces need to have low rents, because you need to have startups that can afford or pay a very low rent for when they're doing stuff.
The R&D work, yeah.
Number 4, you need to have an immigration policy that allows people from around the world or around the country to be able to come in and out and come and go, because you sometimes need talent from other centers to stimulate local talent. Let's say, for example, in Kolkata, they might need someone from Sri Lanka who's really, Sri Lanka's biggest export is exporting accountants. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Sri Lanka exports something like 20,000 accountants all over the world every year. Yes, it's true. So maybe he wants someone with accounting knowledge and fintech. Go to Calcutta. Okay, so
now we've got so many of our own. I think that's a huge opportunity for us to start a new line of exports.
Good. Accountants?
Accountants.
Good idea. Good idea. And then the fifth thing, which is now in all incubation cities, and you might laugh when I tell you this, but you need a good DJ and electronic dance music culture.
Right.
Now, I know you're looking at me as though I'm a little bit mad.
No, I can see what you mean.
What do hipsters and what do geeks?
I'm not laughing, and I'll tell you why I'm not laughing. I don't know how many people who are watching us know this, or I don't know if you've gone around Mumbai quite a bit in most cities. But a new culture coming up in cities like Mumbai and Delhi, and I'm sure it exists in Bangalore, I haven't discovered one yet, is there are these temporary office spaces which are being set up, right? Young entrepreneurs and startups. Now, startups has a whole new definition today in India, right? Startups really start rich these days. But the small startups, like young people who have a great idea, they take just them and their laptops to these offices, right? And they're more like these, one-room offices that they can have. But they are large spaces which they share. And in the evening, they convert into a nightclub.
There we are.
So these people who are going out there can actually create their own ecosystem with other entrepreneurs, with other startups, right then and there. They work through the day and get together for, DJ music, as you call it. So,
and look, the truth is this: if you're developing a startup in your company, you work as many hours as you can stay awake. But people still want to have fun. And certainly in India, it's very important from the days when you were at university or college, where you like having a good time. I mean, if you go to Mysore and you spend time on the Infosys campus, it's an incredible campus with, I believe that they hire something like 18 to 20,000 new employees every year, getting almost 1 million job applications coming into Infosys. But when you're on that campus with the cricket field and the swimming pool and the hotel accommodation, it's incredible. It's like something almost out of a storybook. You don't think it's a place of work. And that's the beauty of this whole new era, because work has got to be fulfilling, always has to be. Otherwise, if you're in a job that's boring, why do it?
Absolutely. I think that's very important. If you're in a job that's boring, why do it?
Exactly.
None of us should do that.
Exactly.
I totally agree with you. Well, I've had a lot of questions pouring in. So I've been holding the iPad, looking at all the questions that people have been sending to us. And before time runs out, I do need to read this out to you, because this is very good. And I think I'm going to extend the session by another 5 minutes, because we've had so many questions coming in. So I'm just going to talk to you about this.
Great.
So question 1, how do large brands and companies deal with the lightning speed that consumers expect in today's fast-moving and competitive environment? So what should they be doing to cope with it?
Okay, well, there's a whole new area of study that is generally called positive disruption. And it's something that is really directed to large organizations. So let's take a large organization in India. Let's think of the railways. The railways here in India has an enormous responsibility to the Indian public and to the country.
Yes.
How do you move something quickly in a system like that, where you've got an enormous bureaucracy? Well, perhaps the railways are not such a good example, because in a commercial sense, things do move faster. But let's say you are in a large insurance company or a large bank, State Bank of India. How do you move things quickly? Because many of these large institutions are too slow for some of the changes that are happening quickly. There are now specialists who specialize in positive disruption. One of the very best in the world is a company in Helsinki in Finland that also do work in India, called D11. And what D11 do is they write out and implement an architectural plan for positive disruption, to show a large structure or a brand what they can do to tap into and touch a faster moving process.
Is that also because we get so used to our systems? That's not just us as Indians, but I'm saying that's us as people generally in any part of the world. They get so set in their ways and their systems. There always has to be someone from the outside who can come and show them the right way. It's much harder for you to recognize that you're in that slow momentum.
It is to a certain extent, but what is so great about modern day India and what has been shown by some of the brilliant ideas and implementations that have come out of India, younger people, millennials as they're called, really want to see change, because they look around, they say, that's ridiculous. The people who founded Flipkart, for example, an interesting and successful company here in India, they wanted to be able to revolutionize the whole basis of ordering products and getting products delivered.
Right. You said millennials. So in a country like India, the millennial is actually soon going to become passé. There's a new generation which is already coming in and pushing and nudging them out. So how do people keep pace with that? Because the new generation is starting their teenage much earlier. Teenage today is at 10. It starts at 10. It doesn't start at 13. And how do you keep pace with that? How do manufacturers keep pace with that? How does technology keep pace with that? And I feel that, we're not even able to understand. We haven't even started the process of trying to understand that new generation coming in now.
Well, it's interesting because this new generation has now been categorized as Generation Z, or what they call in America, Generation Z. So you've heard of Gen X and you've heard of Gen Y,
now Gen
which
Z
tends to be the millennial grouping. But Gen Z would be 16 and under, generally from, I'd say, age 7 to 16 or 15 or so. And one of the things that's come out of research with Gen Z, and there's an interesting company in Los Angeles that specializes in Gen Z. They advise companies on, this is what you have to do for Gen Z. And one of the things that Gen Z kids do, which millennials don't do, is they disconnect more than millennials do. So they decide not to be on their phone or on their tablet all the time. There is a disconnection element. And the other thing is they don't watch conventional television.
Okay.
They watch YouTube.
Right.
All of the time. They would not necessarily watch specific television. They don't.
And what's your theory to the reason?
Well, first of all, it's much more convenient to be able to pull up something that you can watch at your choice. So it's lean forward television rather than lean back television.
And no fighting over screen space.
Precisely.
Your own.
Precisely. And also, many of the characters or things or lessons or education that you get on, say, a YouTube or the YouTube equivalent, which is called Maker. I don't know if you've ever heard of someone called PewDiePie.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
PewDiePie.
So
yes.
PewDiePie, 45 million or so followers, is with Maker. It's
Mm-hmm.
also distributed through YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But on YouTube, some of the big stars that have come out of YouTube, there's this incredible woman. She's of Indian origin. She lives in Toronto. Her name is Lily Singh.
Mm-hmm.
She's called Superwoman. She was actually here in Mumbai just last week in front of 5,000 people here in Mumbai. And she is amazing. Her following is intense. She's just made a full-length feature movie for a company that in itself has got an amazing name. If you go on the web and have a look for a company called Astronauts Wanted.
Astronauts Wanted.
Astronauts Wanted.
They're obviously not looking for astronauts.
Well, they're looking for a new kind of astronaut, which is the Gen Z astronaut, that are basically surfing and flying around the web.
Ah, gosh. So there you go. You know what you're doing this evening, looking for Astronauts Wanted. I'm going to take the second question that's just come in.
Right.
The world's most significant mobile event is the Mobile World Congress that took place a few weeks ago in Barcelona.
Right.
Barcelona, as they would call it. Barcelona. Over 100,000 mobile professionals from India and worldwide attended it. What were the two key areas that got the most attention and chatter at the Mobile World Congress?
Well, Mobile World Congress really is where you go and see what's coming next at a big level, at a global level. Just interestingly enough, they have about 150 ministerial delegations. That is to say, ministers of telecoms from 150 plus countries that come there as well to find out what's going on. Two big issues came out of Mobile World Congress this year in Barcelona. Number one, IoT.
Right. Yes.
The Internet of Things, or the intelligence of things. So where your phone can speak to your AC in your home and you can switch it on when you're away. A whole range of things that are all built into the technology of IoT.
So what was the talk around? Were the predictions on when this is going to become a reality in... it has started becoming a reality, but in a very, very small way. It hasn't really impacted lives yet.
Well, it is starting to impact significantly because this weaves in artificial intelligence and, most important of all, machine-to-machine communication.
Right.
So whilst we might have 7.5 billion mobile phone users worldwide, they are predicting that there are going to be between 50 to 100 billion machines that talk to each other. Your washing machine that talks to your AC, that talks to your electrical system, and all of that is part of IoT, the intelligence of things, or what people generally call as the Internet of Things.
Right. So in our homes, there's going to be more machines talking than people.
I know this will be.
Right.
I was just trying to think of. It's not like hearing people just babbling on, because you won't hear anything. But you know if your fridge was not working. Exactly. No, for example, your fridge will tell you if the lettuce you've got in the fridge, the fruit and vegetables, is going off, or your milk is going off. There's a new milk like a cardboard milk container that when the milk is slightly off, you'll get a text message on your phone. Milk.
Excellent. Life's going to be so much simpler, I guess.
Exactly.
Right.
The second one.
Yep.
Big. So big that Mark Zuckerberg, this great visionary of the modern era, spent $2 billion buying a company that didn't have any products at all, called Oculus, virtual reality, VR. So VR was the other huge thing in Barcelona. And in terms of VR, just this week, the first Oculus device is coming out, but with a lot of competition right off the bat from HTC that have something called Vive, V-I-V-E, from Samsung that have their own device, which got a lot of notice in Barcelona.
Yes.
And there are now companies that had a Bollywood background or a Hollywood background that are making the narrative, the content that is going to be seen on VR.
Interesting. Okay. So last one, perhaps, before I wind up. With something that I've discovered about you. But last one before that is interesting and important to us, most of the countries. Advertising to and for women has seen some pertinent changes in the internet era. Can you give us some examples of some standouts in this category coming from a lady student? So.
Oh, yes. Well, a very good example is a fantastic company that was birthed in Los Angeles, called nastygal.com.
Nastygal.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which basically developed a whole line of fashion, particularly for young millennial women, cool fashion that you bought online, that just had great styling and great pricing. So it would have been similar to like a J. Crew kind of feel. Right. You know, J. Crew, the important global brand. But this woman who developed this company, literally standing start from scratch, found this company developed really well. There's an interesting company that I've just become familiar with here in Mumbai that is developing interesting fashions that are designed using technology, but taking work made by artisans from around the country, from Rajasthan, from West Bengal, from South India.
That's right.
The company is called Milk, and Milk make the most incredible garments. They are just launching. They've already been picked up by all the so-called chattering classes in India, all talking about the fact that it is incredibly comfortable, it's beautifully designed, it's very reasonably priced, and all came out of a conversation that a group of really far-sighted thinking women here in Mumbai came up with. So if you want some milk, it doesn't mean you're going to drink it. It means you might going to be wearing it.
Well, nice, interesting one. So tell me, you've worked in Africa, and I'm a big fan of Chinua Achebe's works, right? His writings. And Chinua Achebe's women in Africa, at least the ones that he has talked about, have gone through some very, very hard times. In your experience, have you seen the women that Chinua Achebe portrays, have you seen their lives change in a country like Africa, thanks to technology?
You mean a continent like Africa?
A continent like Africa, and using technology and mobile.
Well, the country where he came from, which is Nigeria, has seen enormous change, particularly because of mobile being such a transformative element, really helping education. So one of the big areas, those of you that are watching, that are thinking of how could education change? Ed tech, educational technology, big thing. And particularly in Africa, it's a matriarchal society for the most part. Women generally have tended to do very well developing small retail stores using mobile technology to help them with their bookkeeping, their accounting, their relationship with their banks, and so forth. But in general, people say that you must always encourage women. And here's an interesting story. There's a fantastic company in New York called Girls Who Code. 4 years ago, a young woman an Indian woman who lived in New York, was working for a big investment bank. And she said, you know, whenever I go into meetings talking about coding, I just see men, 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 men. Now, I love men. I love going out with men. I love kissing men. But I don't like seeing men coding all the time. Let me start Girls Who Code. 4 years ago, she got 20 girls learning coding. 4 years later, today, there are 40,000 women that are part of Girls Who Code. She's opening up in India. She's opening up around the world, because all of a sudden people recognize if you have women who code, women have got extra sensitivity, analytical ability. I mean, after all, why do we call India Mother India?
Okay. So
women are a very, very important function of the future going forward, because women bring a great sensibility both at a technology level with coding, and also you need to have a woman's point of view to counterbalance just a masculine point of view. Now, I sound like I'm anti-men.
No. I'm not going to object to that. Right. So not that I'm a feminist, but I think, yes, I do believe in the yin and yang of making this world a more balanced place. So I think what you're saying is making perfect sense. So just before we close, I've discovered something very interesting about Ralph, and something that you may not quite ascribe to him looking at his demeanor. Here it is. Simon